And then a vertical vertical shift of 6. So if I'm not saying down, assume it's positive, make it up. All right. So the first thing you're going to want to do is really put it in graphing form, because that's the easiest, because it's really just kind of plugging everything in. So we know that y is equal to, our amplitude is 4 sine of b. Now b requires a little bit of work. So we know that our period is equal to 2 pi over b, and this is what we're looking for. And so if our period is pi, and that equals 2 pi over b, then when we solve for b, we're going to get 2 pi over pi, which is 2. So we're going to put that 2, stick it out there. Did y'all follow that? Okay, and then we know that we have an x. Now we're shifting it to the left, so minus negative pi over 8. And then we're going to go up 6. So this is really 4 sine 2x plus pi over 8 plus 6. Correct? And then we put it into standard form, so we're going to pull that 2 in. So y equals 4 sine 2x plus pi over 4 plus 6. Please make sure you write y equals. It's a function that needs an x and a y. And we're done. Okay? Kind of what we did last night with some of the problems. Yeah. No, I just want you to write an equation. Okay? It says it right here, right? Up at the very top. Okay? All right. So now I want to write a cosine function, so we're going to answer the same questions. My amplitude is 4. My period is 4 pi. My phase shift is negative 2 pi. So is that my vertical or my horizontal? My horizontal shift is minus 2 pi. And I don't talk about a vertical shift, so I have none. So we got to figure out what our b is. So we have to figure out what b is. So remember, period is equal to 2 pi over b. So b is going to equal 2 pi over p. Does that make sense? Can I just jump to that formula right away? Which is 2 pi over 4 pi, or 1/2. So now we can plug and chug. Y equals 4 parentheses x. Can I go ahead and just do plus 2 pi at this point, since we know we're shifting it left, that we know that it's minus a negative or a positive? Is that good? Okay. And then, oops, I just totally messed this up, didn't I? I forgot, what am I trying to do? This is a cosine, isn't it? 1/2, and then x plus 2 pi, and then I don't have any shifting up and down. And so we distribute it because I want it to be in standard form. Y equals 4 cosine, parentheses. You've got to have this in parentheses. This is going to be x over 2 plus pi. You good? All right, you do the last one. You do the last one of these. Yay or nay? Because we want it to be in standard, and in standard form, the coefficient in front is a 1. Huh? For graphing purposes, we don't want that in there, right? Right. For graphing purposes, we need to have it like this. So this is a 1. So we get the right shifting. That's what we've always done. If you look at all of these, we've pulled everything out. We've got a coefficient sitting in front of our parentheses. Oh, I meant an X here. Is this what you're asking me? Right? I'm always wanting standard form when I'm writing my equation. I need to convert it to graphing form when I want to graph it. Okay? Are we good on this? Make sense? Okay. All right, so here we go. Now we get to do this as a word problem. Oh, it's fine. All right. On average, an average seated adult breathes in and out every 4 seconds. So let's think about it. In, out, and in. Wouldn't that be a full cycle? Wouldn't that be a period? In to out to back in is a period. Okay? You understand that? That's a period. In to out, because it's like, if you look at your graphs, it's if I'm starting like on number 5, if I start in, I'm at 0. In gives me my most amount. Out brings me back down. Yeah, that's half a period. Well, no, I think it's into out, but let me think here. All right, so where am I at? The average minimum amount of air is 0.8 liters. There's a decimal, got stuck on the other side. The average max amount of air is 0.82. This is my max. And clearly when you, and then suppose your lungs have a minimum amount of air at T equals 0. So it's not like you ever get rid of all of your air, right? You always have some air in your lungs. It's just you breathe it only unless you're like blowing it out totally. Where time is T in seconds. So write a function that models the air. Look at the graph to help you decide if it's a cosine or a sine function. Graph the function to determine the amount of air in the lungs at 5.5 seconds. Clearly, to do number C, we need the equation, right? Let's do some graphing. No longer are we on the x and the y axis. This is going to be liters, right? How much air we have in our y-axis, and what is our x-axis going to represent? Time. Now, we need to know what is our max? 0.82. So wouldn't that be the most that we would ever have? Wouldn't that be the most? So we're just going to put an arbitrary 0.82 up here. That's going to be the most. And the minimum amount of air that we have is 0.08. So what's that going to be? That's our lowest amount, right? So that's as low down. So we're just going to go here and go 0.08. So I need to figure out my center line, because that's going to be my vertical shift, isn't it? So where is this center line going to fall? Yeah, it's a midpoint. It's in between, right? I mean, if you look at this, aren't we going up and down around a certain value? So we go the same amount up and the same amount down, right? So if we figure out what the average between these two values is, that's going to give me my center line, and then I can figure out my amplitude because I'll know how far up or how far down I go, right? So let's figure out our center line. We're going to take 0.82. Now, how do we do this? How do I figure out my center line? Am I going to add or subtract 0.08 if I want the average? I'm going to add 0.08 and divide it by 2. All right, what is that? Get your calculators out. 0.45. So I'm going to put a little 0.45 right here in the middle, and I'm going to dot it. And then we're going to go 1, 2, 3, 4. Okay. It says average adult breathes in and out every 4 seconds. So this is 0, and this is 4. That's our period. Okay. So we start with normal people. We're down here, aren't we? And then if we follow the pattern, we're going to go to the, we're going to what? Center line. So we start breathing in, right? And then we have our maximum out, yeah? And then we start breathing out again. And then we are back to having none. Megan, this is why it's a full period, because you're going in, hitting that average amount, getting your maximum amount, breathing out, hitting that average amount in your lungs, and then losing all of it. Okay? So, and that's a cycle. Does that make sense? Okay. So now we need to figure out to write our equation. What does this look like? Does this look like a sine or a cosine curve? My hump is below. No. If it was a sine, it would start right here, right? Wouldn't it start right where the center line and the y-axis meet? Look at all of these. But this is a low hump. So is this a positive or a negative cosine? It's a negative cosine. So we know we're dealing with a negative cosine. Now let's fill in all the blanks. So we know that our amplitude is going to be the difference between 0.82 and 0.45. Would you agree? Because isn't my amplitude this amount? The amount above and below my center line, yeah? So what is my amplitude? Okay. All right, now we need to figure out our vertical shift. What's our vertical shift? Am I raising my center line up or down? Up, 0.45, yes? Horizontal shift, well, we don't really have any. Although, if I wanted to, couldn't I shift this highest point back if I wanted to make a positive cosine? But we don't really have to do any shifting because this is clearly a negative cosine, yeah? But I'm saying you could have multiple answers. You could have written this as a positive cosine by taking this point back. But why do more work than we have to, right? So we're just going to leave it like it is, okay? All right, and then the other thing that we need to do is our period. So our period is going to be a little different because we are not, our x-axis is in time. It's not in radians, correct? And we're going to figure it out the same way. It's just our period is going to have pi in it where before it didn't. I mean, yeah, it was just a number. Our b is going to have a number. It's not going to have pi in it, okay? But we figure it out in the same way. We're going to say that we have our period is equal to 2 pi over b. But we're looking for our b. So remember, b is going to equal 2 pi over period. But what's our period? So b is equal to 2 pi over 4. So do you see how in this case we get pi over 2 now as our b, whereas before our b was just an integer? Okay. So we're going to write this as a cosine curve. So y equals, and it's negative because we're dipping down to begin with, yes? And our amplitude is 0.3, so 0.37 cosine. What are we using for our b? Pi over 2. Am I shifting this at all left and right? And am I shifting it up or down? Up, 0.45. So, do I want this as, no, never mind. This is in standard form, but it's also graphing form because I don't have any shifting going on, right? Okay, so we graph the function. We wrote write a function that models the height. So we really should say L. And we shouldn't really use X. What should we use? T. Let's get our units right. So get those units right so you don't lose points. Okay. And so L is our height. It's the amount that we have in our lungs at any given time. Determine the height. No, where are we? Determine the amount of air at 5.5 seconds. So what am I going to do now? Plug in 5.5. All right. So L equals negative 0.37 cosine of, and this is going to be pi over 2 times 5.5 and then plus 0.45. Okay, so get your calculators out. My suggestion, girls, plug this cosine part in first, everything, hit enter, and then add 0.45. What? So you hit cosine, and then just go hit pi over 2 times 5.5, close your parenthesis. Well, let's think. Where's 5 seconds? Isn't 5 seconds here? So 5.5 is going to be, you get negative? Did you put the negative sign in front here? You should get, I don't have my answer here. Are you in degrees or radians? Nope, should be, yeah, you should be in radians. Yeah, you want to be in radians because you're dealing with pi, aren't you? You're not dealing in degrees anymore, so make sure your calculator is in radians. Yep. Yeah. So if I'm giving you degrees, then you should be in degrees. But if I'm giving you pi next to my cosine, then I have to be in radians. Probably. That would make sense that it would be positive. Let's see. So negative 0.37, I'm doing it on my calculator, cos of 5.5 pi divided by 2, close my parentheses, plus 0.45. I get 0.711.
Oh, do you just multiply the pi over 2 times the
5.5, yeah. You can. I did, yeah. So I just did, you can do that. So do pi over 2, enter, times 5.5, enter. That's like 8.639. Y'all get that? I mean, pi over 2. Now take the cosine of your answer and multiply it by negative 0.37 and add 0.45. You get 0.711. I can't help you if you can't plug these into the calculator, right, guys? I don't know why you would do inverse. Do y'all get 0.711?
that's like the exact way you were reading it out loud.
Huh?
If you just
0.71, yeah, not 7 point, but 0.712, sure. And this is liters, so make sure you've got a unit on there. Always, yeah, we should. Anybody still having input error issues? All right, so let's say we wanted to write this as a cosine. Sorry, as a sine. I just want to show you that it doesn't matter, okay? So if I wanted to do it as a sine, what shift do I have going on here? Where is my sine shift going to start at? Yeah, 1 unit, right? Because isn't that where it hits the center line? So we know what our b is. We know y equals, and we know that this is still negative 0.37. Now we're going to go sine We're still going to have pi over 2, but here's where we have our shift. Our shift is going to be x, and then now we have to think backwards. We have to think backwards. We are ahead of where we wanted to be. We are ahead. So how do I show that I wanted to move it ahead? Minus 1, yes, and then still plus 0.04 or plus 0.45. Remember, we are shifting it from here to here. So we have to show that we are ahead of the game. So you kind of have to do a little bit of backwards thinking here. Now, if you still put 5.5 in here, try it now. So in your calculator, you would go, well, first of all, this is negative 0.375 sine parentheses pi t over 2 minus pi over 2. This is what it looks like in standard form because we distribute that inside. And if we let t still be 5.5 seconds, you should get the same answer. So plug it in and see. So maybe what you want to do is pi over 2 times 5.5 minus pi over 2, enter. Take the sign of that, multiply that answer by negative 0.375, get an answer, and add 0.45 to it. You still should get 0.712 liters. Of course you did, Maria. Try it again. Do what I said. Take pi divided by 2, hit enter. Multiply that by 5.5, hit enter. Minus parentheses, pi over 2, hit enter. Take sign of my answer, hit enter. Multiply that answer by negative 0.375, hit enter. Because that was our, oh, sorry, 0.37, yeah. I got my S and my 5, okay. And then, second answer. Oh, I got a question. I made a mistake. What is my mistake? My mistake is if I'm moving this here, and then I'm going up, it shouldn't be negative, it should be positive. Now try that. Yeah, I made that mistake. No, the one above was negative because we're starting down below. Yeah, you should get 711. Okay. Yeah, it is 712 liters. Okay. No? Point. Yeah, we're our good. All right, let's do the next one. All right, here we go. The tide in a coastal city peaks every 11.6 hours. That means the means the highest point is at 11.6 hours. That's our height. The tide ranges, okay. So this is our height in meters. It ranges from a high of 3.9 to 3.3 meters. Suppose low tide is at 0. 1, 2, 3, 4. So if low tide is here, that means that's where it's going to be right there, isn't it? Isn't that where low tide is going to be at time 0? It's going to be at the lowest value of 3.3, right? Now, high tide, someplace in here, let's not worry about this for right now, but according to this, it would go here, right? And then it would go here, yes? What time is this? Where does it peak? What hour, how many hours does it peak? 11.6, right? And then it's going to be at average and then low. So there's my graph. So now we've got some work to figure out. Okay, so what is this really? 23.2. So it takes 23.2 hours to get back to where it was, right? Because it goes, it peaks, it comes back down, right? So let's find our center line. How do I find my center line? So I'm going to go 3.9 plus 3.3 over 2. What is that? 3.6. So now we're going to put a 3.6 here, which means my amplitude is what? 0.3. Because that's how far up and down I go, right, from my center line. Does this look like a sine or a cosine curve? Cosine looks like, does it look like a positive or a negative cosine? Where's your hump? Is it above the center line or below the center line? To start, if we know that this looks like a cosine, so we're assuming that we're starting right here at the vertical axis, are we above or below? We're below, right? So we want to think negative. Okay. All right. We need to figure out we know our period is 23.2 hours, yeah? And so we know that V is going to be 2 pi over 23.2. And we can just leave it like that because that's a crazy number. Just leave it like that. Bless you. And what's our vertical shift? Yep, up 3.6. It's wherever our center line is, isn't it? Wherever that center line is. So we're going to write this as a cosine. Y equals negative 0.3 cosine. Our B is 2 pi over 23.2 parentheses time. We're not shifting. And then plus 3.6. Now let's not make this mistake again. Let's say we wanted to write this as a sine curve. We go y is equal to, we don't need the negative because if we're doing a sine, this is where we're at, right? So it would just be 0.3 sine, still 2 pi over 23.2. Now, I got to know what this value is right here because that's what I'm shifting. How do I figure this out? Okay, this is why we did all this practice, right? We take 11.6 and we divide it by 11.6 divided by 2, 5.8. So we're going to go t, and then are we subtracting or adding? 5.8, and then plus 3.6. Does that make sense? Are y'all with me on this? Because you know on your quiz or test, I'll ask you to write 2 equations for the same function. I'll ask you. No. All right, so now we've got our equations, we've graphed. Determine the height of the tide at 6.2 hours. It doesn't matter which one. Plug in 6.2 for your t and tell me what you get. I get 3.632 meters. Well, let's see. 2 times pi enter divided by 23.2 enter times 6.2 enter. Take the cosine of that answer enter multiplied by negative 0.3, hit enter, 3.6. I got 3.623. You got it. Hallelujah, Maria got it. Hardest class of the day. All right, girl.